Hi everyone, my name is Jen and I am a recovering addict. I'm currently 14 months and 26 days clean from fentanyl patches and pain pills. I got clean on April 14th of 2017. It was one of the hardest choices I've really ever had to make in my life because I had been an addict for over 10 years since I was the age of 12. My drug of choice was fentanyl, patches, and pain pills. Specifically, Vicodin, it started out with, and then it went to Percocets and things like that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it started out and, how I got to that point. When I was 12 years old, I used to get really bad menstrual cramps. And I would get a lot of pain from it. So I remember talking to my mom one day and telling her, my cramps are really bad and this and that. And she had said to me, well, I have this pill for you. Why don't you try it? And it'll help take your cramps away for your menstrual. And I said, okay. Trusting my mom that she had my best interest at heart. I took the pill. And at that time, it was a Vicodin. I had no idea what a Vicodin was back then. I was only 12, and I was following, what my mom wanted me to do, A daughter looks up to her mother, so I did as my mother said, and I took the pill. And, this went on every month, when I would get my cramps and I'd get my menstrual, she would give me, the pain pills to take for, the first 4 days out of the 7 days because I had really bad, menstrual cramps. So anyway, as time went on pretty much, it went from monthly to eventually I just got hooked on them. I got severely hooked on these Vicodin. I didn't realize that they were so addicting. I was only 12, like I said at the time. So it got to a point where after a few months of taking them, I would then start to, sneak them. Because, friends at school were taking them, and I just thought, what, it'll be cool. I was starting to get a little, I wouldn't say dependent quite yet, but I was enjoying the high that I was getting off of them. Or getting the feeling I would get from, the euphoric feeling you would get from taking them. So, I started sneaking them. My mom was prescribed them, and my stepfather at the time was also prescribed them. So I would start to, sneak them out of their bottles, and I would take them. And it got to a point where I'd say I was at the age of, at this time I'm about 14 now. And I'm now taking about anywhere from 15 to 25 Vicodin a day. I think they were the 500 milligram ones back then was the ones I was taking. So I was taking, high doses of the Vicodin. And I was only, like I said, about 14 years old at the time. And I would take, like I said, about 15 to 25 a day. And then on top of that, I decided to start, drinking as well. Now, drinking was never really my drug of choice. It was more something I would do when I would go to, parties with friends and things like that as a social thing. And I would drink and, my main thing, though, was these pain pills. And I would smoke weed from time to time with friends at parties and things like that, just thinking it's all for fun and games, this is just fun, I'm just being a teenager living my life. I had no idea that what I was spiraling into would lead up to my demise and my ultimate, my addiction. I had no idea it was going to lead to that. I thought, oh, well, this is just going to be, it started out for my pain, and then it went from that to, wow, this feels good, I feel like a new person, I feel totally different. So, I just continued to take them. And then finally, by the age of 14, I was taking about, like I said, anywhere from 15 to 25 Vicodins a day. Well, what ended up happening was one time I was at a party with a friend of mine who I thought was a friend of mine anyway, I'll just say that. And, at this time, we'll go back a year. I was 13. And I was at a party with her. And there was, I'd say, about 50 or 60 people at this party. They were all much older than me. At the time, like I said, I was about 13 now. They all were in their, I'd say late 20s, 30s. There was a few people in their 50s. It was just a crowd of a lot of older people than myself. Besides my friend that was with me. She was a year younger than me. And I went to her party, and I ended up, taking a lot of the pain pills, and I got extremely high off the pain pills, and drunk as well. And later on that night, there was a guy who had said he was 18, and like I said, I was 13 at the time. And he had said to me, because it was New Year's, he said, when the ball drops, would you like to come with me downstairs to the basement alone and smoke a bowl of weed with me? And I had said, sure, why not? I didn't know any better at the time. I thought he was cute. I heard that he was a model and this and that, and I was just so excited to go downstairs and talk to this really cute guy. I thought it would be just so cool to do. So I proceeded to, at 12 o'clock, right after the ball dropped, because it was New Year's that day, and him and I went down into the basement, and we smoked what I thought was weed. I, to this day, don't really think it was just weed. I think it may have been laced with something else. Because by the time I got back upstairs, I ended up drinking. I didn't quite feel that well at the time. Something just didn't seem quite right, but I couldn't quite pinpoint it. I thought, well, maybe it's just I drank a little too much. I don't know. By this point, I had already taken a lot of pain pills, and I had drank a lot of alcohol. So I proceeded to go back upstairs, and this man, the 18-year-old man I had said about, I was laying on his lap somehow. I don't even know how I really ended up there at this point. And I was drinking a beer on his lap by this point. Like I said, I don't even know how I ended up getting to that point. And I passed out. Well, I remember being woke up, sort of-ish. And next thing I know, I'm being carried by this 18-year-old boy. Well, let me back up quick, actually. Before that happened, before I, passed out or whatever on this boy's lap, there was a 50-year-old man who, I guess, came to the party with this 18-year-old boy. And I don't know if it was his uncle or whatever, but I had asked him if he could make me a drink. And he said sure. So he got me whiskey and brought it back to me, and I drank it. And that's then when I remember, things start to go a little weird, because I had just went downstairs with this guy and smoked what I had thought was weed. And then, like I said, when I came back upstairs, I asked this man out in the kitchen, because it was a house party, if he could make me a drink, and he brought a drink in. I didn't watch him make the drink, see, because back then I was just a teenager. I didn't know any better. I was young and dumb. So I took the drink, and I drank it all. Next thing I know, I'm completely, passed out. And then when I kind of was awoken, I guess you could call it, I was being put on this 18-year-old's back. He tossed me over his shoulder and onto his back. And he had said, everything's going to be all right. At this point, I couldn't, how do I explain it? I couldn't see anything. Every time I tried to open my eyes, everything was blacked out. Every time I tried to walk, I couldn't walk. I just felt completely helpless. I don't know. I don't know what he gave me when he made the drink or whatever he put in that weed or whatever, but I just was completely gone. Like, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't speak. I couldn't walk. The most I could do was crawl. And like I said, by this point I'm on this guy's shoulder. Like, he threw me up over his shoulder because, back then I was really small from using drugs. I was only like maybe 80 pounds soaking wet, and he threw me on his shoulder. Next thing I know, we're leaving the house and he's walking towards a van, like he's gonna take off with me. And my friend's mom, who was at the party, because the party was at my friend's mom's house, she came to the door and she was like, "Where do you think you're going with her?" And all of a sudden, it was like I heard a voice in my head say, "Jen, if you don't find the will to get off of this man's back, you are going to end up either dead or raped." And it was like a voice that came to me. I think it was God. I think it was, his angels. It was definitely God looking out for me, because at that point, somehow I grew this energy, this power to just somehow fight and get off this guy's back and run into the house. So now I'm finally back in the house, and I made it into the house away from this guy. And my friends at that time, mom, carried me upstairs to her room. And it was her daughter's room. And she put me in a nightgown, like a long sleeve, like a long t-shirt that's like a dress, how girls sleep in that at nighttime or whatever. So she put me in this and she says, "You're going to be fine, just go to sleep." And back then I was prescribed medication to sleep. And so she gave me my sleeping medication on top of all this stuff that I had already done, and things that had been laced into my drinks and into that weed that I had smoked that night. And I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. And she pretty much shoved it down my throat and told me to take it. Well, next thing I know, things just kept getting worse. She leaves the room and tells me to go to sleep. Everything will be fine. So, next thing I know, the older man from the party, I would say 20 minutes later, as I was laying in my friend's bed, 20 minutes later, the door opens up, and I'm still, like I said, I can hardly speak. I can't walk. I can't really even hardly talk. I could talk, but it was very, very, very limited. I probably was on the verge of death. And this man enters the room. The guy that had poured me the drink, the 50-year-old man. At the time, I was only 13. He comes into the room and out of nowhere comes in front of the bed and says, "Have you ever been raped before in your life? Because you seem like the type that has been." And at this point, I was scared. I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do nothing. Yet again, there was that voice in my head saying, "Jen, if you don't find a way to get out of this room and call someone for help, you're going to end up raped or dead." Now, mind you, I did find a way to get up. I don't know how, but I give all the praise to God. I think God is the reason that I got out of that bed that day. Because as soon as I got out of that bed, it was like I was running. I ran. Somehow I made it over to my friend's mom's bedroom. And I ended up calling my cousin to come get me. Thankfully, they came and got me. Paramedics showed up. And they looked at me inside the paramedics, the ambulance, and they said, because my mom had showed up at the time because I was a minor, and I lived with my mom. And when the paramedics showed up with my mom and cousin, they checked me out alone in the ambulance, and they said she has all the signs of being raped, and we highly suggest that she goes to the hospital now. Well, back then, I was scared. I didn't want to be labeled as a snitch, so I didn't go to the hospital. But I'm almost 110% sure I was raped that night. I just can't really remember what happened because of whatever they laced. Plus, on top of that, I was using pain pills because that was my drug of choice back then. So, that was when I was 13. Well, growing up, I didn't have a very good childhood. My mom was very abusive, very, I don't know how really to describe it. She just was very, very abusive, and whether it be verbally, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, she was just very abusive towards me. So, that went on from the time I was about 4 years old, clear up to when I graduated high school, and it was hell, you know. She just was, that's how she was raised apparently, but that's how she treated me, horribly. Well, things with me and her just, here of late, just haven't been that great, but that's besides the point. I'll get to that later. So, back to, the rest of what happened in my life during, you know, active use and things like that. So, then I met a guy later on down the road when I was about 14 and a half or so, I'd say. And he was, you know, a little bit older than me, a few years older. And I would go to his house, and his house was in the city, you know. And I grew up in the suburbs. And, you know, I was kind of testing things with him as well as far as drugs go. But still, pain pills had been my drug of choice, you know. My mom introduced them to me at the age of 12, you know, when in all actuality, she had a drug problem of her, you know, her own. I just didn't know about it at 12, but I just knew, hey, my mom's giving me these pills at 12. I'm going to take them. She says they're going to help my menstrual cramps. I'm going to take them. So I did. And then I ended up getting hooked. I'd say by the time I was 14, I was full-blown hooked. Well, I met this guy, and we started dating for about a year and 4 months or so. And we would do drugs with each other from time to time. Whether it be, you know, back then it was pain pills, it was marijuana, it was, one time I had tried cocaine with this person. It was a lot of things. Then I can remember at one point I used to hang out at the mall with my friends. And that was, you know, the spot for all the cool kids to go to and hang out at the mall. So I went to the mall with my friends, and I used to also take these pills. Well, first I tried taking them because I heard that they would make you feel funny, and it felt cool. So everybody had said. So I would take these pills. They were called Dramamine, and they were supposed to help with motion sickness, but all the kids back then were taking like 5 or 6 and they'd feel funny, right? So I decided, well, I'm gonna take like 10 to start out. So I did. And I continued this cycle for a few months, you know, taking these Dramamine pills like 10 at a time, along with my Vicodin. That was my main drug of choice. And the one time I took about 15 to 20 Dramamine, which Dramamine is, it's crazy because you can purchase this stuff at your local pharmacy, and it's, you know, there's no prescription for it. And I took like 15 of them, and then I took, you know, my usual 20 Vicodin that I would take in a day. And then on top of that, I decided that day, Because I was only about, still again, I was about 13 or 14 when this happened. I decided, you know what, I'm going to take the Dramamine, 15 of those. I'm going to take my usual 15 to 20 Vicodin. And I'm going to take some caffeine pills on top of it. And I'm going to get wasted, you know. So I did. And I went to the mall with my friends. And next thing I know, I'm heart's racing. I'm headed for an overdose. I knew it. I knew an overdose was coming. And I felt like I was going to get sick, so I ran to the bathroom immediately. I was puking everywhere, and when I was puking, there was blood everywhere as I was puking. It was horrible. I was scared. I was terrified, you know. And the thing about it is my mom supported my addiction because she was an addict, but yet at the same time, while I was a teenager, if I would like go to her and tell her I'm having an overdose, she would freak out and snap out on me and become very abusive towards me. But at the same time, she was promoting what I was doing. It's kind of hard to explain, but my mom is a diagnosed sociopath. So I knew at that time when I was overdosing, man, if I tell her, she's gonna, you know, beat the hell out of me. So I decided, you know, what am I going to do? Am I going to walk back home? Because, like I said, I wasn't old enough to drive yet. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? You know, all my friends, I don't even know where the hell they went. They bailed on me. And I started throwing up in the bathroom at the mall. And I came out the stall, and I was just so pale. My whole entire face was pale. And this girl that I had went to school with, she was a few grades higher than me. A girl who I actually did not get along with. Surprisingly, I did not get along with this girl in school. She came up to me and she said, "Sweetie, are you okay?" And I said, "No." I said, "I think I overdosed. I need to get home now. I don't know where my friends are at. They all bailed on me. Can you take me?" Because she was old enough to drive. And she's like, "Absolutely, I will take you home right now. You know, whatever you need." So she ended up taking me home. And I go inside and I haul up to my bedroom because I knew if my mom seen me, she was going to freak out, even though she supported my addiction, but didn't want to admit it, you know? It's kind of hard to explain. So I haul up to my bedroom and, you know, I'm tossing and turning in my room and it's like not getting better. The room is spinning. The walls are just, everything is just horrible. I'm puking in my room. And I was like, you know what? Forget it. I gotta tell my mom. Because if not, I'm probably gonna die on this bed. Like, seriously, I'm gonna end up dying. So I walked out the room. And I went to my mom's bedroom. And I said, "Mom," I said, I did something. And she said, did you do drugs?" That was the first thing out of her mouth. It's like she had already known. But didn't really care until I said something. Like, it was weird. So I said, "Yeah, I think I overdosed." And so my uncle lived with us at the time, and she had him pick me up because at this point I could barely walk. And he carried me down to the living room, and she called, you know, an ambulance, and they came out, and they asked me if I was trying to hurt myself or harm myself, and I really wasn't trying to hurt or harm myself. I was just trying to get high. And I told them that. So they took me to the hospital, and I went to one hospital the first time, and they didn't do nothing for me. They gave me a pill, a charcoal pill for underneath my mouth, told me I was going to have to deal with the side effects for 24 hours. All I could do was just throw up. Nothing was working. They sent me home, told me just get some rest. 24 hours later, you should be fine. Well, went home, was having a hard time breathing. My heart was racing. I just felt like I was going to die. So I went to another hospital this time. And they told me, "Look, you know, if this doesn't get resolved soon, we're going to have to pump your stomach." And so finally I had got it all out of my system for the most part. And at that time, that is when they had diagnosed me with my panic and anxiety attacks. And they had prescribed me clonazepam for my panic and anxiety attacks, which I'm still on to this day. And it does help greatly with my anxiety and things like that. So thank God I didn't have to get my stomach pumped, but I overdosed twice at this point in my life. So I go home, and we'll go back to when I was about 16. When I was dating that guy I had mentioned in the beginning. That was a few years older than me. We're just going to jump ahead with this, and he ended up ultimately not being the best influence on my life at that time. My mom was constantly in and out of prison, in and out of jail. My stepfather was left to take care of me, while my mom was in and out of prison literally my whole life. And I was with this guy I had got with. I was about 16. Started dating him at like 15. And around 16, things just started to go completely downhill, I got so attached to this guy, I ended up, when he broke up with me and cheated on me, I ended up cutting my wrist all up, and I tried to kill myself. At the time, I was still on these drugs, and it was just getting worse and worse with these drugs, I just kept taking more and more and more of the pain pills and stuff. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that my mom was constantly in and out of my life, being in and out of prison, and I just wanted to be there for her. As a teenager, I didn't know what I know today. I'll put it that way. So at that time, I just felt no matter what my mom's going through, I need to stay by her side. Even if she's abusive verbally, mentally, emotionally, physically, psychologically, I just need to be here for her. And so, that played a big toll in my life, and I think that's also another reason why I would use the pain pills as well to self-medicate, because it was just painful to grow up in such a dysfunctional family. But back to the guy that I was dating when I was 16, he ended up cheating on me, and I ended up cutting my wrists, and I wanted to kill myself. And yet again, as I was slicing my wrist, I came to a point where I was about to take the knife, and I was gonna just stab myself, either in the stomach or in the chest. I didn't care. I just wanted to die. So, I heard a voice in my head, yet again, and it said, "Jen, please don't do this. There is more to life left for you. You just don't see it yet." So I stopped what I was doing. By this point, my arms were already cut up. Blood was running everywhere. But the voice that I heard, yet again, I believe it was God or an angel, stopping me from actually killing myself. That was God and his angels telling me, don't do it. You have so much more to live for yet, and it is not your time. So I stopped. My wrists were bleeding, this and that. And I ended up calling my biological dad because my stepfather was in bed. He had to go to work the next day. And my mom was in prison at the time. My stepfather was a hardworking man. He had to get up at like 3:34 in the morning every single day to go to work. He was a very devoted man. Good guy. Great man. He was like my second father. He was a great man. And so I decided, I'm going to let him sleep. I was drunk and high at this point. So I called my biological dad. And I said, "Dad, I need you to come get me." I said, I made a bad choice. I cut my wrists and I'm drunk and I'm high. Can you come pick me up? I have school tomorrow. Ronnie, which is my stepdad, He's in bed. He has to work tomorrow. Can you come get me? I need you. And so my dad came and got me, and I remember him helping me into his apartment at the time and sleeping on his couch for the night. And he would come in and check on me throughout the night to make sure I was breathing and okay. And in the morning, he pretty much had said to me, Jen, do you want to go to the hospital? You know, I think we should get your wrist checked out to make sure that, you know, you're okay. I'm worried about you. I'm your dad. You know, I want to make sure you're okay. And I was skeptical because I figured, man, if I go to the hospital, I'm going to end up in the psych ward. And anyone that's been in the psych ward knows it's not fun. And if you think you're crazy now, when you get to a psych ward, you realize you're really not crazy after all. That's just how I looked at it. But I said, I guess we can go, Dad. You know, I probably should get him checked out, see if I need stitches and this and that. So while we were on our way to the hospital, my dad wanted to first stop by at my nan and pap's on my dad's side of the family to see them first. Now, as we were on our way to go to the hospital, he had rode past my nan and pap's house and seen that their house was literally on fire. Now, talk about feeling guilty inside. I'm like, wow, I am like, was so high last night, out of my mind and on drugs and trying to kill myself. And now here's my grandparents' house and it's on fire, and it was just a mess. So when we got there, you know, everybody made it out the house safely, thank God. My pap was out the house safely. My nan was out the house safely. But there was one person that was not out of the house safely. Well, it's not a person, it was an animal. It was a dog. It was my pap's dog. And it wasn't just my pap's dog. It was the dog that I had got my pap as a gift. The dog had ended up passing away in the house during this fire. And my pap had dementia. And long story short, that's how the house ended up on fire. He turned a burner on that had oil in the pan and didn't realize he left it on, and that's how the house caught on fire. But the dog that he loved so much that I had got him ended up dying in this fire, and he was just so heartbroken. I felt terrible, you know. I didn't want to tell them what I was going through at that moment. All I cared about was making sure that my nan and pap were okay. So once, you know, things calmed down with that situation, my dad finally took me to the hospital. Sorry, I'm going to smoke a cigarette. Amber, I know you don't like people that smoke cigarettes. I'm getting there. One day I'll quit, but not right now. So